29th of November, and we are well into the English winter now. A week ago we had a flurry of snow and the temperature went to -4 centigrade at night, and the daytime temperatures was around 4 or 5. Yesterday we had temperatures of 14 degrees centigrade, and today the temperature is 11 or 12. So the English winter is quite variable, but it is really fairly mild compared to some of the other countries I know. When I was in Canada in September of this year, some of our friends were telling us that in places like Saskatchewan, and in the Midwest of United States, they have really cold temperatures, well below freezing. And during the winter months, I guess they can't do anything. Well, our plants are all bright and green. They're not even protected from the frost. So we are able to do some work on the trees. So we're lucky in that respect. Those of you who live in tropical countries, I guess you can work throughout the year as well. So what am I going to show you today? I'm going to work on some conifers, and because I have all these greenhouse facilities and tunnel facilities, I can protect them. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do this morning. I have 5 yews here. I'm not sure if it is an English yew. It looks like it, but they were produced by another wholesaler, not in this country. But what is different about it is that when these plants were small, they put 2 small yews together. Every single one of these has 2 trees planted together. They're not twin trunk trees, they're separate trees. So that is how they did it. If I wanted to be clever, I could take it apart and make it into 2 bonsai. I might well do it to one of them. But because they've been growing here for at least 5 or 7 years, taking it out may be a bit of a drastic action. But as I said, I might well do it to 1 or 2 that can be separated. Now that one, the 2 planted together, they've almost fused together to form 1 tree. So when you see things like this, I bet you must be wondering, what is Peter going to do? Those of you who are, how would I put it, not so, I think, aggressive. I wouldn't say aggressive is the word. They must be saying, what is that silly bugger going to do? Is he going to ruin the tree, or is he going to do something very interesting? Those of you who are more congenial or support me will be looking forward to what I do. But that is not the point. I'm not bothered in the least what people think. My thought is to show you what goes through my mind and how I would tackle it, so that by doing these things, you can benefit from it as well. So I've already told you the way I think. I think many of you like my thought process, because if I think aloud and show you what is going through my mind, you can look at the logic that I follow when I approach different bonsai projects. So when I look at these trees, I say to myself, now they don't really look like bonsai. For those of you who are new to bonsai, and for anyone who's not really deep into bonsai, will laugh at these trees. They're not really bonsai, they're just bushes. And to my mind, they're also like bushes. For some people, they will probably just do a very rough trim. Let me just show you what I mean. Just make it into a conical shape. Mind you, all these 6 inches of growth has happened in the last summer. They were pruned in the spring, but since the late spring, I've not touched them. Why I have not touched them is because we have thousands of trees. I can't get through them all. My staff can't get through them all. But also, there's another reason which I don't do it is because I like to keep them for my YouTube projects. As I have mentioned in the past with other videos, back in the 1970s, all the bonsai that were produced in the UK, because there were very few imports, were just little conifers and pots, and they called them bonsai. They were worse than this. So when I look at a tree like this, I mentioned to you that because these are two trees put together, I'm just wondering if it is worth separating the trees to get two bonsai out of it. As I say, I may do it to one of them just to see if it is possible. See, many of them, if you look at it closely, what goes through my mind is that this is a very nice tree in its own right, this one. But that at back is really doing nothing. So that one may be spoiling this. So there may be a case of separating this one. So that is what I'm thinking. I never take rash decisions. I don't just prune it and say, there you are, I've created a bonsai. Now the more I look at these trees, the more I'm convinced that putting these two trees together doesn't do it justice. It seems to be a waste. This one's got a lovely line. That would make a nice tree on its own. And this tree here is spoiling the other tree. So I'm now faced with a real dilemma. A real dilemma. Same with this one. If you look at it, that's got a beautiful line. And this one may have a beautiful line looking at it this way. I think there is a line in there. So what have I set myself to do? Now this one, because it's fused together, I think this is the simple one. Let's tackle this one first. In fact, I may have to do this video in two parts because there are so many trees. Each tree is a separate tree in its own right, and it would be a waste or a shame to spoil it by doing it too fast and too rapidly. So I know that if I do that, open it out and bring these branches down, I would get a much more refined looking tree. So this is coming down this way. So let's see what would happen to that. Okay, the ends I think I don't need. So that's what's happening to that. Okay. Now to bend this, I think that's already nicely bent. I'll probably put a wire either linked to this one or go to that one. So I'm going to bend this way and then open it out. The yew wood is quite hard and it's very springy. After all, the English longbows were made from yew, so I've got to be a bit careful that I use the correct gauge of wire. You notice that I still use my trusty Felco secateurs. I think any other bonsai person would be trimming these ends with this, but how inefficient that would be. There is no need to do that. Even with scissors, the bonsai scissors I could use, but I've seen so many people use a branch cutter to prune thin twigs like that. That is quite unnecessary. The branch cutter has its uses, which is like cleaning the little burrs on the trunk to make it more easily wireable. Okay, so how will I bend this? And because I really should be using the two branch principle, I will use the two branch principle by linking the wire around that stub to provide the anchor. Where there are bits of foliage on the branches that you're going to wire, you can quite safely pull it out. Talking about working in the winter months. This is the onset of our English winter. I believe that all evergreens continue to grow even in winter, albeit at a slightly slower rate or slower pace. In fact, this year I'm going to do some experiments because I'm always experimenting with trees. I may do an experiment of feeding the conifers in the winter to see what happens. I've already done a mild feed to some of my ficuses, but I might do it to some of our evergreens like the junipers. Yews are very bendable. But because it's quite a stiff branch, I'm trying to do a zigzag. I'm just wondering if I can manage to do a zigzag. If I can, it would look better. And then create the pads. Unfortunately, that branching there, the start of a pad is too far out. I want the pads to start from there. So I'm going to prune all this back. I shouldn't really waste too much time showing you the detail of wiring unless you particularly want to see me do it. See, this is what we're going to do. With the fine wiring, we're going to wire it flat to make the pad. There is also a case of not having this branch too cluttered here. But I may keep it to develop it and see what happens during the year. I don't want to close my options. And then over here, we need to start making the base of the triangular shape. I always like to remind people that when we design a bonsai, as long as you make the shape triangular, you will not go far wrong. As I always remind people, bonsai is not rocket science. Even the design principles follow certain rules, and if you follow those, not rules, certain guidelines, you won't go far wrong. So if I use this branch to form the base of the triangle, can you see the base of the triangle? You will create a credible bonsai. So that is a nice first branch there. That could be a nice back branch because I need some back branches. And then we need some branches here. That sadly is popping upwards like that. Can you see? And if I were to bend it down, it will be going up and coming down. I might do it, but it would be better if it came from the elbow of the tree. The elbow would be better. And because the yews, they grow so fast, this will form a nice thick branch within the next year. I'm now going to proceed by wiring those two. I hope you'll excuse the sound of the rain because we've got torrential rain beating on the roof of the greenhouse. So when you wire two branches together, you can jump from one branch to the other using the two branch principle. But where you can, if you go around the trunk, this is just my way of doing it. If you go around the trunk, it makes for more stable wire. So this gives a more stable anchor. If you try to go from this one to this one, it may not be so stable. So going around the trunk is always a preferred way of wiring. Again, this is just what I think. Some great Japanese masters may think differently. After all, I've not been to Japan, so I don't know how they teach there. I like to just try different methods to see what works for me and what doesn't work for me. As we always remind you here on our channel, there is no absolute right or absolute wrong way. You think that there would be certain principles that are sacrosanct, but even sacrosanct principles can sometimes be changed. That is how the world develops, and that is how progress happens. If you accept everything for granted, you do not make progress. So never take anything for granted. Okay, so I'm now going to wire this other bit. That one I'm using true branch principle. I'm linking that one to that one. So you can see how the shape is opening up. A far cry from a thing like that. So thinning out is always an important part of the refining process in any bonsai. Now this one is jutting out or springing up. Let me wire these two together and see what happens. I'm going through all this very slowly with you in case those of you who are just starting out in bonsai can learn something from this. So that's the base there. Now we're going to wire those two. I don't know whether I would use that. I'll keep it. I don't want to cut it off straight away. I might regret it if I realize later on that I need it. Now, do I need that one there? See, there's one branch there. So I may leave it to see if I need some backdrop or depth to the tree. Now this branch here, which is quite a thick one, if you come close, you see how it's coming out from there. It's not coming out from an elbow. So that could create a problem. And in 1 year, it's become so stiff, very hard to bend. But I may keep it just to help thicken this part of the trunk. So it's acting as a sacrificial. So I'm not going to rush to take it off. This is what's going through my mind all the time. I'm always looking to the future and also to the present because I want it to look quite nice while I'm developing. If I keep looking to the future, I'll never see the end of the tree. Okay, again, now let me go around the trunk and wire these two little branches together. I sometimes don't feel it's right to take up too much video time showing you these little bits of detail, but I think it's important, especially for those of you who are mainly newbies to the art. Every little bit of information does help. Okay, I'm not decided about this. I may decide in a minute. So I've got another branch there. I can bring that down. So while these two, I've got these two. You see how I'm thinking ahead all the time. So these two are there. I can wire these two branches. And all the time I'm thinking what grade of wire to use, what grade of wire to use. This 2 mil may be okay, but if it's not thick enough, I may need to switch to something else. If I can remind you, 2 millimeter wire is such a widely used wire that it's always handy to have 2 mil around. For those of you who are not familiar with the yews, the yew is a very prolific tree. Many people seem to think that just because it's an evergreen, it is slower in growth than most other subjects. But believe you me, the yew is very, very prolific. Now that I've put that branch in place, I can then decide whether I need that funny branch which is popping up in the middle. I don't want the top to be looking too scalped, so I want to keep a crown where I can. Now these two branches can be wired. Again, we pull some of the foliage out, the leaves out, so that when I apply the wire, it doesn't trap the leaves, because the leaves would fall eventually. So I can trim the ends off. The basic principles with most conifers is that whenever you trim the ends, whether it's a pine or a juniper, it forces the thing to bud back. You see how nice the shape is turning out? Now I've got to think whether I need this one or not. See, this is popping out there. I could wire it up like that and go like that. But coming out like that and then going backward may not look so nice. But I won't take that decision yet. That back branch I think is useful because I need something to provide depth. Because without the depth, the tree won't have the perspective that I need. But there's a problem that it is a very stiff branch. Can I use a thinner branch? I think this one, I'm not sure about that. I may keep that. Now that thick branch is troubling me. If you look at it, it's so thick and it seems to be bouncing up and down. So I think if there's a problem, I will cut it off. I think so. It may cause me problems later on. So I'll take that off. So I'm going to use that one instead. So that will give me the depth. So these branches will give me depth. So there you go, I will do that. Again, I clean the foliage so that when I apply the wire, it doesn't trap the leaves. This applies to pines and junipers as well. Very simple little procedure. I'm now using 1.5 mil wire. 1.5 mil and 2 mil are very popular sizes for trees of this size. Now because this little tree here is already a bonsai, I wouldn't class this as raw material or untrained material. It's certainly what we would call semi-trained material. And then we can wash some of these. Although if you leave it like that, it forms a nice bushy crown. So we're still faced with this one. What do we do with this one? I think we can safely take it out because I don't like the idea it's coming up and then you're going to make it do that. So in this situation, somehow it doesn't look right. So I'm going to take it out. Also I noticed that because there were so many branches going from this point, there is already a slight touch of inverse taper happening. Can you see how fat it is over there? So if you have too many branches growing from one point, that is the source of the future problem called inverse taper, where you get a lump. I can bring this lower down. Okay, I won't do too much. These two trees have been intertwined and I've got a tree looking like this. So from something which started off almost like that, we've got something like that, which is more recognizable as a bonsai. You can go on and wire some of these, but because I want a full crown, I will leave it like that. So really I'm showing you the general principles of tackling a plant like that. Now while I'm still running this video, I will look at some other trees which I will probably not take apart. Now that I've set myself the challenge, you know when someone dares you to do something, you say, oh, I must pursue it. But I will use a bit of judgment and caution in case I don't get carried away that just because someone has challenged me, I have to do it. But it doesn't look right somehow. You know, that's too far apart as a twin trunk tree. So what is that doing? That's doing nothing. I may keep some of them to do it, but that sort of tree is crying out to be separated. So let me show you what I will do now. Let me take it out of its pot. Okay, there you go. The roots are very nice, very good roots. And this is just like organic compost. There's no acadama or anything. This, by the way, that would make an ideal cutting. If you just stick that in good compost, it will root. Just put some hormone rooting powder and that should root. So they're very easy to root. Okay, so let me try and wrench this apart. Sometimes you can be successful, sometimes not. So don't laugh at what I'm doing. I'm going to put my foot on it. You may think that it's being cruel, but if it does the job, that's what matters. I think I've separated it a bit. It was joined at the bottom there. Can you see? The roots had intertwined. So I'm now going to be very careful in how I separate it. I'm going to cut it with the secateurs, and I know that each tree will have half the amount of root ball. So that's what I'm going to do. In fact, to make life simpler, I will use one of my old silky saws and try and cut it like that. It's like King Solomon separating the twins. There you are. So there's plenty root ball there. I'm going to plant it in quite a generous training pot, and then we will see where we go. Now each tree, I will look at it separately. I've decided to put it in this plastic training pot rather than a clay training pot because it's got tying holes and I want to tie the tree in. So I want to tie the tree in so it doesn't rock about. And I planted like this because the slice I cut is wedge shaped. The front is really here, but I'm going to put it here temporarily because that root ball fits in there. So don't laugh at me when I plant it at the wrong angle. It should be really, this should be the front, but I'm planting it like this because the wedge of the soil fits the pot very nicely. I'm also going to use a more open soil now to encourage more roots. This is our standard akadama, and then the volcanic grit and a bit of organic. I think there's 50% akadama and 25% organic, 25% volcanic grit. So that is our standard mix. We do vary it from time to time, but that by and large is our standard mix. Now let's show you what I can do to it now. Well, when I've done something as drastic as this, some people would say it's not a good idea to work on them just now because you want the tree to get established. But if I'm going to reduce some of the foliage, I may be doing it a good turn. Okay, so I can see a rudimentary S shape in there. And this can be the low branch, even if it is a sacrificial branch, it would be useful. When you are faced with a situation like this, don't try and make it like an exhibition tree straight away. This is still a tree in training. So again, I'm taking the tips out. Not only am I reducing the foliage, I'm creating potential bud back by doing that. So I've flattened it out. That one probably I don't need too many sacrificials. This looks like a very plausible front. That can be a branch there at the correct place, in the right place. What can I pair it with? I'm always looking for the second branch to pair together. There's a thick branch going that way. Now this is a thick branch. I need to pair it with another thick branch. Similar thickness branches I will pair. So although we've separated the two trees to make one tree, there's still a lot of detail wiring to do. Okay, that's a thin branch and the wire is thicker than it needs to be. So I'm just doing like an open coil to guide the wire along. I keep propping the tree up to get the desired angle for the future. How high do I want the tree to go? That remains to be seen. That I can take off because it's poking me in the eye. That I can take that way. And that I don't need too many there. I always remind people that when they wire, don't try and look too far ahead. Just go to the next one. So that's a possible branch to wire. This I could wire with one of these. Okay, wire those two. Look at it. That's a nice tree in its own right. When I have access to all this lovely wire, my mind goes back to the days, even in the mid-80s, I kid you not, because bonsai wire was not so easily accessible. Mind you, the so-called bonsai dealers, all they ever imported were bonsai trees. They hardly ever imported bonsai tools. So wire was the last thing they ever imported. So we used the insides of electric cables, and for thicker wire we used to use coat hanger wire. How difficult is that? And here we can have every size and grade of wire that we wish. Well, I don't want the thing to go too high, so I have to, what they call, bite the bullet. And so over here, if you look closely here, it's been chopped over there, and there's a branch going there. So that would make a nice leader, that one. So I'm going to chop this one in the middle there. That's how I decide on the leader. I find a potential branch that is popping out which could serve as the leader. So that's the one I took out. And again, because I don't want to keep letting this go taller and taller, there's still some very strong branches there. There's a very strong branch there as well. You see how thick that one is. The more I look, the more potential candidates for removal I find. That's a very thick branch. So that, I said, was the possible leader. So these which are popping up could take over as the leaders. I'm going to take them out. So I've reduced the height slightly. See, already looking nice. And I've only done half the wiring. So the detail wiring I'm not going to show you because I've shown you the basic structure that I've created. All that remains is to wire these fine bits. I will get Josh possibly to do some of the fine wiring. So that is one tree, that's one half. What happened to the other half? Now let's see what happened to the other half. So the other half is this one. So this one I will plant also in a training pot and let the thing develop. Now this one is not so straightforward. So let's see what potential there is in this one. So let me remove some of this foliage to see what is happening. Straight away I can see that it's a problem tree because it's simply been hacked and these side shoots have just grown up straight without any shape or form to it. If you look at it closely. I'll try and remove some of the foliage. There are lots of these straight branches, like a pollarded tree. You know what a pollarded tree means? That means you cut the top off and let all the branches grow like a broom style. So look at that. These have all grown straight. This growing straight, that straight, that straight. So nothing has been done to create movement to the top. So I'm faced with a situation where I have almost a blank canvas. Should I just grow it as an ordinary tree and let it get thick and then do something? So this is what's going through my mind. So if I can't do anything, why should I force it into a bonsai shape? It's like planting trees in the hedge. Let it get thick. When it's thick enough, I will then do that. So sometimes we don't have to force ourselves to keep making bonsai at this young stage. This is a typical case for growing on to become what we call raw material or potential material. So I won't even waste a bonsai pot. I'll just put it in an ordinary flower pot and grow it on. So sometimes you've got to take that decision. So I will leave that aside. So I've done 2 fairly credible trees and there are 3 more trees in pots here. I'm conscious that I don't want this video to run too long. Now this is another situation. Half the tree here has got a very lovely S shape, but the other half is dead straight. So let me, before I do too much, remove some of this foliage because, as they say, you can't see the wood for the trees because there's too much foliage here. Remember that when you make bonsai, the trunk is the most important thing. It is absolutely paramount. And until and unless you see a credible trunk, you cannot see the bonsai. So that one you see over here, that's a very nice line there, but that's growing straight up. So do I need that? Possibly not. So I can make it into a gin, should I want to, but let me keep the option open. So that could be a gin. So I'm just doing this to see how the trunk grows so that I can create some movement on the trunk. See, already straight away I can see some possibilities here. Can you see that lovely movement there? A lovely movement there. So we cleared some of the debris. That's what we call it, debris. But before I do too much, I've got to decide what could be a possible front, what could be a possible back. Again, too many branches. I can see that this is going straight up. Let me take some of this off. So again, we've got a situation where one tree has got a lovely S shape, which obviously has been shaped at some early stage in its life. And then the back one there is not so interesting. Let me bring my famous bag and see what we're looking at. See, that is the interesting part. That is the interesting part. That could be a gin, should I want a gin, but I don't always like making gins just for the sake of gins. I've always said that. Many people, every single tree in their collection has gins, or every tree has to be carved. Why do that just for the heck of it? This is the trap a lot of people fall into. But let's see what happens, and if it is interesting, I'll keep it. If not, I'll discard it. If it's a distraction, then I will get rid of it. But if it is appropriate, I will leave it. If it's not appropriate, I'll get rid of it. So that distraction is still there. So again, you don't realize how important this bag trick is. Without the bag trick, you lose perspective, you lose sight of what you want to achieve. See, that's what I want to achieve. Mainly concentrating on this. So what do I do with that? Again, I could either separate it and make it a separate tree as raw material, but in this instance, because it's growing quite close there, why don't I keep it? Let's keep it for now. I could then use this as the base of the triangle. So I will now just do this. Make a bit of gin feature with that. So these will be potential candidates for ginning. Can refine that. So if I do that, I will create a nice triangular shape. So in this instance, I didn't go out of my way to split the tree in two parts. I'm going to do this. So sometimes they say discretion is the better part of valor. For those of you who are not familiar with the English language, this is one of the sayings that we were taught in school. Discretion is the better part of valor. So sometimes, you know, you can think that you're not doing the right thing by doing nothing. Many people think that doing nothing is being lazy. Not so, because very often in life, doing nothing is a very credible option. And when you do nothing, there's a reason for having done nothing. And this is one instance where I'm doing nothing because it's going to serve a purpose in the long run. So we're just guiding the branches in this angle, and that's going to come up. So I'm going to have to use a fairly thick piece of wire to do that. So you can already see the shape of the tree coming along very nicely. Okay, I wire this. It's quite amazing the number of shoots that these yews produce. As we say, anything which is a hedging material or hedging plant, they are very prolific in how they grow. I'm just anchoring the wire on one of the branches and then going up the trunk. Anything obviously hanging down, we remove. So that's the base of the triangle. Once you've established that, that's fine. These are fine wiring that we will do. And the rest is really selecting branches, because I'm conscious of taking up too much video time. I'm going to wire it so you can see the basic structure. And I'm now going to do fine wiring, and I will have had another lovely tree like that. So we showed you several projects So this is only half of one tree. All these yews were like two trees planted together, and we were deciding what to do. In some instances, like this one, we decided to leave it alone. We kept the two together, and we made this a separate branch with a little bit of gin. This has got to be refined a little more, so we kept the two together over there. Now that very first one we did, this is also one where the two branches or the two trunks were intertwined, so we kept those two together. This one was joined. I'll show you the other part. The other part is here, and we decided not to do anything to it because we are going to grow this into a much bigger tree. So we will sacrifice that one for the time being, and we used half the tree to make this. So this is Josh's wiring, beautiful wiring, and we've got a beautiful little tree out of that. So this is where we've got to. We've got two more to do. I'll probably do that on another occasion because nothing lost in reinforcing the learning process. What we wanted to remind you about is that this is not any ordinary yew. I just looked up Wikipedia or Google, and we found that this is called Texas Media. And apparently if you look up Google yourself, under Texas Media, it's supposed to be a hybrid. It's called a European cum Japanese hybrid. Apparently the hybrid was produced in Massachusetts, USA in the early 1900s. It's a cross between Japanese yew, which is Texas cuspidata, and Texas baccata, which we call the English yew. So you can see that the foliage is typical yew foliage, but it comes in little roundels or cusps like this. So this is a cross between the two yews. So this is a bit of botanical information for you. So you can see this is much, much better than this blobby sort of thing like that. And we're going to deal with all these to show how we refine it. So we'll keep this as the first part of the video. The second part of the video will be refining two further ones. Okay.